my presentation? Wonderful, thanks very much. So this cartoon, we did a project on comics and climate change last year, and this was by far and away the most popular of all the cartoons we put out there, 64,000 shares across social media, where polar bears and penguins try and flee the melting ice caps and don't quite pull it off. I'll come back to that in just a minute. But what I wanted to talk about before we kick off today is about the role of Manchester and our role in literally saving the planet, and the kind of future that we've both made and make as we go forward. And this is all about what our city can do to actually, in particular, avert the climate crisis, but also to create a more sustainable and more prosperous future. So here we have the birth of Manchester. So this is the General Agricola ordering the construction of Manchester like a Chris Oglesby in a toga. He's building the city. For those of you who don't know, this is modern-day Castlefield we're seeing constructed here. This is Ford Madox Brown painting of the birth of Manchester. So just to kick us off, I said there's a light bit of interaction. If we go back to AD 79, when Manchester was founded, what do you think Manchester is named after? Okay, we're going to do a vote on this. Is it A1, Agricola's mother? It's a funny name for a mum, but there you go. Was it about Manchester and patriarchal power? Or was it a breast-shaped mound? So, number one, who thinks that we're named after Agricola's mother? Hands up. Thank you very much. Two. Okay, who thinks it's all about patriarchal power? It's a man in Manchester. Oh, not bad. There's about 15, 20. Who thinks we're named after a breast-shaped mound? Yes, there we go. We're a booby. So moving on. Manchester's history is fascinating, but one thing, has anybody heard of the phrase the Anthropocene? So it's the idea of this sort of, the new epoch that we're entering, where the global, the sort of geological epoch has shifted something where humankind is the predominant force on the planet. And I find this really fascinating to think about this and Manchester, because if you think about all the things that define the Anthropocene as breaching natural systems, whether it be the ability of the biosphere to accommodate humankind, whether it be our use of fresh water, whether it be biochemical flows in nature, we're breaching so many of these global boundaries because humankind is now shaping the planet. It's no longer geological forces. And Manchester literally has got its fingerprints all over that epoch. So if you think about some of the great things that Manchester has brought to the world, and they are great, they're future shaping, this is the future we make. We've got obviously the Industrial Revolution, we've got women's suffrage, we've got modern computing, the first passenger railway journey, although Stockton-on-Tees and Darlington argue about that, but we won't get into that today. We've got, literally the space race. So Bernard Lovell heard Sputnik, told the Americans, and we started to build a tunnel. And the Peterloo Massacre, workers' rights, free trade, you name it, Manchester has been there. And so it's no wonder that the historian Asa Briggs called us the shock city. We literally are the shock city that shapes the modern world as we know it. And if you look at the different Kondratiev, for you economy geeks out there, Kondratiev waves of innovation, it's really fascinating to look at all these waves and reflect on just how central Manchester was to all those waves of innovation, whether it be, the very first water power and textiles, steam, chemicals, the splitting the atom happened here. So all of these things are things that we've shaped. And I think it's really fascinating to think about that, because if you then look at the power we used and the energy we used and the fossil fuels we used to shape that future, it literally, you could put your button on sort of the very first steam power that Manchester used at the very first mills. And we are literally on this curve. This is Manchester creating where we are now. And then if you map that fossil fuel use across to what we've been doing to the climate, and these are the famous climate stripes that show temperatures shift over an average from, again, what some people think is the start of the Anthropocene, around 1860 through to today. You can see we've got this consistent wave of warming. And again, I like to think that this is Manchester. I don't like to think it's very dreadful, but I do think that Manchester has played a huge part in all of this. So we've got this sort of moment where we need to reflect and realise that we've been hugely successful. We went post-industrial, we've revived, we are now Manhattan, as some people call it, and we've had a huge part to play in all of this. And so I like to think that that brings with it a huge moral responsibility to realise that the climate crisis that's impacting the rest of the world is something we were the authors of. And so we have to do something about it. So what can we do? So this is a report that I got to work on a couple of years ago, which is all about how cities can actually face the climate crisis and what can we do about it. And the good thing is we do know what we can do about it. And this was by some clients of ours called the Coalition for Urban Transition. And this, I love a good chart. This is actually really, really inspiring for me, because this is basically, to cut a long story short, this is what cities need to do to avert the climate crisis. And here we've got population size of different cities and how much carbon they can take out of the atmosphere and abate, okay? And what you'll find is this big orange block and the green block here are cities of between 1 and 5 million people, exactly the same size as Manchester. We are the model for most of the carbon reductions that the world can make at a city scale, which is really inspiring. We are in this zone. We have huge potential in this space. And how do we do it? Well, we have to do, cities can drive this really powerfully. It's too easy to say, oh, we can't do it, it's national policy. But this is a chart that shows how much we can do in cahoots with national government. So here, if you take the decarbonisation of the grid out of the equation, what I find really fascinating is that about a third of the carbon emission reductions that we need to make, cities can control on their own. A further third we can do enabled by government. So 2/3 of our carbon emission reductions cities can achieve. And the final third, we do rely on national governments to shape the policy that we need for that. And so we have the sort of carbon reduction journey, the pathways that we need to go on. We know what they are. We know what they look like. We know what we need to achieve, whether it be through decarbonising electricity or whether it be reducing fossil fuel use. And broadly speaking, if you look at all cities across the world, this is what it looks like. Buildings are the biggest part of it. Transport is hugely important. Resource efficiency is really important. That gets ignored far too much and is really important. And down at the bottom here, you can see this is a huge investment, okay, that we need to make. But if you think that we basically need to put in 2.8 trillion US dollars a year into it, the return on investment is 3 times that. So this is not a zero-sum game. We can actually make a good return on our investment if we decarbonise. And this is the playbook, basically, for zero-carbon cities in this diagram. And it's everything from mass transit, active transport, energy efficiency programs, the electrification of everything, including heat, better materials efficiency, more dense cities. We know what this looks like to achieve this future and where we need to get to. And so I always say, if we were the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, if Manchester go on this journey to become a sustainable city, nobody can say it's too difficult at all. And we're cracking on with it. So this is the symbol of the B network. I'm very proud to say my team designed this. So when you see it on the buses, we were the ones that thought, we'll put some handlebars on that B. And it's those little things that cheer you up every day. So in Manchester, we're working hard on transit and transport. We've got a really good energy plan for Greater Manchester. I think it's pretty pioneering that the Greater Manchester Combined Authority have done. We've got programs like Your Home Better, looking at domestic retrofit. We're looking at heat networks, and with the Coal Authority in Oldham in particular, piloting a really inspiring project that I get a bit obsessed about. Tom from GMCA will know I get obsessed about this. Whether you can take heat from disused coal mines and use it to pump into heat networks. That beautiful poetry of the coal mines that created the Industrial Revolution potentially being a zero-carbon heat source, I think is amazing. And just to geek out for just a minute, here are all those coal mines. Imagine that. So here's the M60 orbital. The red crosses are coal mine entry points. So it gives you some idea of the scale if we use them to decarbonise heat. And just with a nod to Cal Data, the other thing I find fascinating about our heat network plan is data centres could play a huge part in it as well. And we're doing well on trees. So I'm very great to have a partner called City of Trees. They've planted 860,000 trees so far. We're almost towards our 1 million target for 1 million trees for Greater Manchester. So we are doing well on all of that. And we've got an amazing programme that a number of colleagues in the room are involved in called Be Net Zero, which is where we're trying to make Manchester the easiest place in the UK to become a zero carbon business. And we're really focused on that. And we've got an amazing partnership, including Pro Manchester, that powers this Be Net Zero programme. And for all of you, if you haven't come across it before, please do check out Be Net Zero and take our commitment to become a net zero business in Greater Manchester. And we've got a number of different campaigns we've been running, a rooftop revolution to get more solar onto the business premises across Greater Manchester, and we're just currently promoting EV charging points and whether businesses can install some more of those. And a really exciting one is focusing in geographically, so whether we can decarbonise areas like Trafford Park. So 5 minutes left, I'm almost there. That's what we're doing, but we need you guys to play a part too. So second quiz question, I'm almost there. In terms of personal responsibility in this space, what is the most climate dangerous thing you can do? Is it A, eat meat, B, drive cars, or C, have sex? Okay, so hands up. Who thinks eating meat is the most climate dangerous thing you can do? Very good. It's a smattering. Who thinks driving dangerously while on your mobile phone? That's got quite a few. Who thinks having sex is the most climate dangerous thing you can do? There you go. I think. So here's a useful chart from Friends of the Earth. Things you can do. This is how many tons of carbon you can save from different lifestyle changes. And eating a plant-based diet is significant, but definitely going car-free is high. Having one less child is by far and away the biggest impact you can have on your carbon footprint. It's not quite having sex. You can still have sex without having children. Just health warning on that. It's called contraception. It works, usually. So if we're making all these changes and Greggs have got a plant-based sausage roll, are we all saved? Is it all okay? Is it all fine now? Are we okay? Are we safe? Is the planet saved? No, it's really fucking not. So we have still got a huge amount to do. And so we are not safe. We've still got a massive mountain to climb. And so here is Greater Manchester's carbon budget and how far off track we are. So the blue graph here is Manchester's carbon budget and where we're supposed to be. Set by the Tyndall Centre, science-based target, 2038 is our carbon neutral destination point. Here is where we are currently, the orange. So there is a gap between where we need to be and where we are today. And so we've still got a huge amount of work to do. And the key areas where we need to do that are within reach. We know what they are. Business needs to decarbonise faster. I think business has the potential to make a huge difference. About a third of our carbon footprint is business. And so we are agile, we can move fast, and that's why we're running Be Net Zero. Decarbonising our homes is probably the biggest one, and we're just not making enough headway on retrofit at the moment. Hurling towers up in the city centre that are not zero carbon is insane, and we need to stop that. We need to start really ratcheting up the quality of our building stock. We need to address aviation emissions urgently and transition away from cars. And finally, there is still work to do on nature. Our rivers are not at the quality they need to be. Our habitats are not good enough. The only area of nature that we're doing well enough on is trees. So getting there is challenging. And the reason I put this quirky red line is the longer we leave this to get back on track, the steeper our curve is, the sharper the transition needs to be to get to net zero. So it's really, really critical that we accelerate, and we accelerate hard, which is not a very zero carbon analogy to use. Pedal faster, people. So we need to get on track with all of this. And there are 3 ways for me that I think this can happen, why today's event is really, really critical. We need to inspire people to make change. And the reason I'm a climate optimist is because we do not have recourse to giving up on this challenge. In particular, my sort of Gen X generation, if we gave up on this challenge and just literally said to Gen Z, oh, go on, sort it out, it would be the most dereliction of duty you could ever imagine. So we have to get on track. We have to inspire people to make change. And then the 2 things that I hope we can reflect on today is we need to invest in that future. And that means we need to invest in the clean tech, the green tech, startups. We need to invest in every business decarbonising. So it's not just the ones in the sector that need to do it. You'll hear a lot of that today, but that investment point is really critical. And we need to innovate. So we know what we need to do, but there is a gap between the technology we have today and where we need to get to. So the innovation that we're going to focus on today is really, really critical, because that's how we can get to a climate-safe future. Thank you very much. So, with that little trundle through, and everybody thinking, sex? Really? I'm going to hand over to our first panel, which is going to be chaired by the amazing John Robb. John, lovely to see you. And this is going to be looking at